Alright, so today I would like to present about rendering graphics. So basically, rendering graphics is design involve creating visual representations using various techniques, and which is hand rendering, raster rendering, vector rendering, 3D rendering, and real-time rendering. So this technique help designers achieve various artistic and functional goals and across digital and print media.
Okay, so there's 5 tools that we can use in rendering techniques, which is hand rendering. So rendering include pencil, ink, markers, and watercolor. The second one, raster rendering. Raster rendering include Adobe Photoshop, Corel Painter, Procreate, then graphic tablet. So the third one is vector rendering. So the vector rendering include Adobe Illustrator, Affinity Designer, and Inkscape. The fourth, 3D rendering, Blender, Cinema 4D, Autodesk, 3ds, Max and Maya, and Substance Painter. And the last one, real-time rendering. Real-time rendering include WebGL 3, and Unity and Unreal Engine, and SVG editor. So, type in sketching and rendering. Sketching and rendering are two essential stages in process of creating visual representations, whether for architecture, product design, and illustration. They are often used together to first explore and communicate ideas, and then to visually bring them to life with detailed effects, the light, shadow, and texture.
Hello, my name is Samar Azim Muhammad Rafi, 09 DAJ 23F 1057. Okay, first, sketching. Sketching is the initial stage where ideas are explored quickly and freely. It's more about concept, proportion, and basic form rather than precision. Key points in the sketching process include: first, loose and fluid lines. Sketching typically uses freehand gestural lines to capture the essence of the subjects. Lines should be light and flexible so you can make change and correction easily. This stage is about planning the layout, composition, and general proportion. Number 2, basic shape and structure. Start with basic shapes like cubes, sphere, and cylinder to map out the geometry of the subject. Focus on the overall form, composition, and scale. 3, perspective and proportion. Sketching involves establishing perspective, 1 point, 2 point, or 3 point perspective. It's important to get the correct proportion before moving into finer details. Rendering. Rendering is the process of adding life and detail to sketch by focusing on light, texture, and depth. It's the step that turns an idea into a more polished, visually rich image. Key elements of rendering include: first, shading and light. Establish where the light source are and how they affect the object in your scene. Use gradients of dark and light to suggest volume and forms. Highlight areas show where light hits, while shadow areas depict where light is blocked. Number 2, texture. Add texture to indicate materials: smooth for glass, raw for stone, soft for fabrics, etc. Use various strokes such as cross-hatching, stippling, or smooth shading to suggest different surface qualities. Number 3, color and tone. Apply color to enhance realism or convey mood, depending on the subject matter. Work with tonal value, the lightness of darkness of colors to create depth and dimension. Marker rendering techniques. Okay, marker rendering techniques are popular method for creating vibrant, detailed, and realistic visual representations, often used in design, architecture, and illustration. Markers offer rich, saturated color and smooth blending capability, making them ideal for creating both sketch and full renderings. Here are some key marker rendering techniques. First, basic stroke techniques. Straight strokes use smooth straight strokes for clean and uniform fills. This is helpful for flat areas of color or texture. Circular stroke. Small overlapping circles can be used for creating smooth gradient and softer text, especially for organic surface like skin or fabric. Number 2, blending wet on wet. Markers blend best when applied to a damp surface. Apply one color, then use a marker of a different shade or tone while it's still wet to create smooth transition and blends. This is ideal for gradients and smooth transition between colors. Blend marker. A blend marker, a colors marker, can be used to smooth transition between color and create soft gradients. It can also be used to soften edge with this area of color. Number 3, texture rendering stippling. Finish dot create with a marker build up shading and texture. Processing. As mentioned, layering strokes in different directions to create a richer texture and darker shading. Type of rendering. Rendering refers to the process of generating image from a model or sketch, typically adding details such as color, shading, texture, and lighting to create a realistic of style final result. First, realistic rendering. Goal, achieve a highly detailed and lifelike representation of the subject. Characterize, focus on the accurate portrayal of light, shadow, color, and texture. Number 2, non-photorealistic rendering. Goal, create images that are stylish artists of or abstract instead of strictly realistic. Characterize. NPR emphasize creativity and artistic expressions, often giving image and hand-drawn of painterly fit. Number 3, architectural rendering. Goal, create visual representation of architectural design on and to showcase building or interior design. Characterize. As the architectural rendering focus on depicting buildings, interiors, and landscape in a realistic or stylized manner to communicate design concepts.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Muhammad Haziq bin Kawal Nizam. My matrix numbers is 09DRG231019. Today I'll be explaining about color in rendering technique. First, we have traditional rendering techniques using pencils and markers, and then we have watercolor rendering, which uses textured layers of paint and soft gradient. Second is digital rendering techniques using bitmap painting, which uses software like Photoshop to mimic traditional painting. Then, vector rendering. It creates clean, scalable graphics with smooth gradients using tools like Adobe Illustrator. Third is hand rendering with mixed media. It combines traditional tools with digital enhancements to merge authenticity and precision for dynamic visuals. Fourth is color theory in rendering. We have to adjust the hue, saturation, and value to control focus and mood. And then we have to use warm and cool colors. And then we also have to use complementary colors such as opposite on the color wheel, such as blue and orange to create strong contrast and visual interest. Is how to render. Rendering is a process of turning a sketch or a model into a detailed visual representation by applying colors, textures, lighting, and shading. It can be done traditionally with tools like pencils, markers, and paints, or digitally using software like Photoshop or Blender. This technique adds depth, realism, and visual appeal, bringing concepts to life effectively. Various techniques into rendering, such as traditional rendering, using hand-drawn techniques, digital rendering, using softwares like Illustrator, Photoshop, or 3D tools, shading techniques, lighting techniques, and then texture techniques. In rendering, we also have different types of backgrounds and also the techniques. First is solid background. Solid background is just a single color using flat colors or gradients to emphasize simplicity and draw focus to the subject. Second is textured background, patterns or textures. It applies hand-drawn patterns or digital textures to add depth or thematic relevance. Third is blurred background, out of focus background for emphasizing the subject. Technique used is by Gaussian blur in digital tools or soft shading. Natural background is the fourth one in the background and techniques for rendering. We have landscape, skies, or environmental elements. It creates layers for foreground, middle ground, and background, adding perspective and detail. Fifth is abstract background, geometric shapes, splashes, or abstract patterns. Technique is used by experiment with brushes, splatter effects, or vector shapes for creative designs. 6 is dynamic scene background, realistic settings like cityscapes, interiors, or action scenes. Technique used is by perspective grids or 3D models to establish accurate spatial relationships.